truth comes through. Fresh start in the morning blue. Hey, now blue sky shining down. Left your feet, don't touch the ground. Life it off, let the good times stay. Oh yeah, it's a blue sky day. Coffee steaming, a smile breaks free. Simple joys are enough for me. Stones roll out, but I don't mind. Sun's still waiting on the other side. Turn it up, feel the sound. Good vibrations all around. Hey, now blue sky shining down. Lift your feet, don't touch the ground. Laugh it off, let the good times stay. Oh yeah, it's a blue sky day. No heavy weight, no looking back. Just open roads and a steady track. Hands in the air, feel the sway. Let the light carry us away. Hey, now blue skies. Wake up, sunlight tapping on the door. Feels like I've been here all before. Radio humming, the world feels right. Every little thing's in tune tonight. Shadows fade, the truth comes through. Fresh start in the morning blue. Hey now, blue sky shining down. Lift your feet, don't touch the ground. Laugh it off, let the good times stay. Oh yeah, it's a blue sky day.
Hey, good morning. You're listening to the Conservative Cat Show, so do appreciate you tuning in this morning. It's the day after Christmas. Let me know what you did over Christmas break if you're back at work this morning. Tell me a little bit about maybe some of the gifts you got, some of the traditions. What is your favorite Christmas tradition? Throw it in the comments section. Yesterday, I really like, I'll tell you my favorite Christmas tradition. Tradition is telling you about how Kwanzaa is a fake and gay holiday. That's one of my favorite Christmas traditions. Every single year, I kind of put out a podcast and I walk you through how Kwanzaa was created by a cult leader who actually burned women in the mouth with hot irons. Yes, this is true. And he only served 4 years in prison after two women testifying against him and there being evidence, according to court records, of prolonged severe abuse. Okay, so this is Everett McKinley, and he was convicted in 1971, never talked to reporters about his conviction, got out in 1975 because he wrote some politicians, some radical leftist politicians, and he got out, and he only served 4 years, and Kwanzaa is just a completely fake holiday. It's a very new holiday. It's created around 1960 something, 66, I think it is. So if you missed that episode, go check it out. It's archived for you. We did that episode, and then we also did the St. Nicholas episode. So I asked the question that makes people really uncomfortable. Should Christian parents be telling their kids about Santa Claus and presenting Santa Claus as an omnipotent, all-powerful being who knows when you're sleeping, knows when you're awake, and is a morally judging deity? I think that Santa Claus has kind of turned into a deity. I question whether Christian parents should, present that as truth, or I think that you can do Santa Claus, but it's got to be clear. Hey, this is pretend. And the truth is, there is an actual guy, and actually, the story of Saint Nicholas is far superior than anything Santa Claus, this fictional character, has ever done. Saint Nicholas, he went to prison for Jesus Christ. He created the Nicene Creed, which says that Jesus Christ is equal to God and that Jesus Christ is everlasting. And there's scripture that proves that Jesus Christ was in the beginning. The Word took flesh, and He is God. Jesus Christ is God. Now, at the time in the early church, 1st century through the 4th century, the early church, there was a theological disagreement, if you will. Eris of Alexandria, Eris said, Jesus Christ, he was created and very, very powerful, but he wasn't God. Okay, and there was obviously a clash inside the church. Not only in the early church was it completely illegal to be a Christian, the Roman Empire was jailing people, much like St. Nicholas, jailing people, killing people, burning down churches, burning scripture, burning the Bibles. So that was happening. And at the same time, St. Nicholas and others, they faced, really blasphemy from members of the church. So there were two enemies that St. Nicholas had to deal with. And through all that, he came from a wealthy family, but his parents died at a very young age, so he was an orphan. And he had sort of this humility, humble type beginning, but with his wealth that he inherited from his dead parents, what he did, he gave gifts. And particularly, we talked about this story with the 3 women whose father fell into poverty and couldn't pay their dowry. So what he did, he threw gold into their house, and he lived by scripture. It says, hey, give without any kind of expectation of reward. Give in quiet. What your father sees you do in private, he will reward. And St. Nicholas lived by that. He was a devout Christian, willing to die, punched a heretic in the face, actually. Arius, as tradition has it, we don't have a ton of documented history about it, but he went so as far as to punch somebody in the face who said that Jesus Christ wasn't Lord. And I don't know about you, but St. Nick is pretty dang cool. And we don't tell kids about that story. No. We would much prefer lying to them about an omnipotent, all-seeing, all-powerful Santa Claus that is not real. And then we're confused when our kids grow up and they say, I don't believe in God, or I'm not a Christian anymore. Maybe it's because, you told them about this fictional character and they later found out he was fictional. And it only makes sense. I mean, who else is all powerful, all seeing, morally judging, a just God? That's God. And you told them about this guy who turned out to be fictional, and then all of a sudden your kids don't believe in God. So that's my hot take. If you want the full show, we take a deep dive, and that's archived. We did that on Christmas yesterday, the 25th. So those shows are there for you. Today, we're getting right back into the news because the news does not stop with President Donald. I went to bed last night and I was like, look, I'm sure that I'm going to have to wake up, and I had something else sort of planned. I was going to talk about Hanukkah, which I might still do, the Christian perspective on Hanukkah. And we'll probably still do that later in the week, maybe for New Year's. But this time of year, the news always gets slow. I've been doing this a long time, like since 2020. Okay, so for 5 years now. And I know that the news gets slow around this time. Not with this Trump administration. Okay. So first, I do want to talk about Governor J.B. Pritzker. So he was out and he was celebrating this Supreme Court win of his, a win. And I'll discuss why I think it's not a win. But there's also this Bush-era insider. So he served under the George Bush administration. And he says, whoa, 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 Governor JB, not so fast. Don't be celebrating this win, the Supreme Court win of yours. Don't be celebrating. I actually think this is going to go in favor of President Donald Trump. So we're going to get to this story. We're also going to talk about Trump announcing, of course, this is the news that I saw it right before I went to bed last night, about 6:30. And I right before, we started winding down for the night, I was like, whoa. I was like, I did not expect that. So he announced this deadly strike against the ISIS terrorist Scum in Nigeria. And you're going to get a lot of takes this morning and afternoon on this. You're going to probably hear from the America First folks saying that we're entering a foreign war and we're getting involved in foreign wars. Look, this is not, Nigeria helped us. Okay. They worked in cooperation with the United States to carry out these strikes. They want to combat radical terrorism as well. So this was a strike against ISIS terrorists, not Nigeria, the African country. We're talking about going after ISIS, much like the Venezuelan strikes. Okay, that is not an act of war against Venezuela. This is a strike, imminent threat. And I mean, what better way to celebrate Christmas than taking out the ISIS terror scum in Nigeria, who's taking out Christians? Okay, so I think that it was a lovely Christmas present from the president. So we're going to get into that, plus something's taking effect on January 1st that you need to know about, especially if you're a gun owner. So Illinois' new gun law could cost you $10,000, even if you're the victim. So that's nice. Yes, these gun laws, guns don't kill people, people kill people, period. But we're going to get into it, and I want to start here with Tuesday. So you might have missed this, the Supreme Court, because that was right before, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day. On Tuesday, what the U.S. Supreme Court did, they refused to issue a stay on a lower court ruling that blocked President Donald Trump from deploying National Guard troops in Illinois. Okay. So we knew this. The lower court said, no, Donald Trump, you cannot deploy the National Guard in Illinois. This is what a lower court said, applauded by JB and his ilk. And then we were hoping that the Supreme Court would say, no, of course, President Donald Trump can federalize the National Guard and deploy them in Illinois. We were hoping that the Supreme Court would disagree with that lower court, but they didn't disagree, and they refused to issue a stay. So to prohibit the lower court from blocking President Donald Trump from deploying the National Guardsmen. The Supreme Court was not on President Donald Trump's side. So it appears on the surface. Let me get to Justice Samuel Alito. He issued a blistering dissent, essentially saying that the courts were hindering the Trump administration from protecting federal officers. Of course, many conservatives, if you had heard the news, if you weren't, busy holiday shopping, many of you were outraged and you were complaining that the arrival of the President Donald Trump administration 2.0, since this advent of the Trump administration, judges have done everything in their power to kneecap his agenda. Hell, they won't even let him make renovations to I wouldn't be surprised if a judge says, Trump, you can't wipe your butt in the White House. Like, that's where we're at right now with these judges and the judicial system. It's been weaponized against President Donald Trump. They have an agenda, and they've been trying to take out the Trump administration judicially. And conservatives are upset by that. We've been outraged really since the arrival of President Donald Trump 2.0. The Supreme Court has issued some favorable decisions along the way, but not this time. The Supreme Court was not favorable to the Trump administration this time. They said, don't deploy the National Guard, essentially. And I'll get into the ruling because it's much more complicated, and it doesn't prohibit President Donald Trump from deploying the National Guard in the future. But one person, and this is Justice Alito, was not happy in his dissent on the case. He didn't mince words about his displeasure with what he sees as, quote, unwise, imprudent determinations made by a 6-3 majority. And in addition, Alito, he's not one to really hold back his opinions. But in addition, Alito had said that he thought it improperly, the decision here, the 6-3 decision, improperly took power away from the executive branch. Okay, so he says that this is rash. They're not showing care for the consequences of their action here, the Supreme Court. It's unwise. Here's what he says, quote, the majority also did not give enough deference to Trump after the president found out that agitators were hindering immigration officers and other federal personnel from doing their jobs in Chicago, that the National Guard needed to step in and help. Okay, so you had immigration officers. So this has nothing to do with sending immigration officers into Chicago. This has everything to do with the National Guardsmen. So the immigration officers went in and they were trying to carry out Operation Midway Blitz, I think is what it was called, in Chicago. And you guys remember the woman, I think she rammed her car into one of the ICE agent vehicles. Somebody showed up with a gun. A woman was ultimately killed. It got really out of hand quickly. That Ron Burgundy bit, man, that escalated fast. That escalated quickly. That's what was going on in Chicago. And what President Donald Trump had done was deploy the National Guard because, hey, our immigration officers are being hindered. And I'm saying that and putting that lightly. They're being attacked by agitators. And Alito here is saying, like, President Donald Trump has to be able to use the National Guard to protect federal personnel when they're doing their jobs. Okay, so Alito is pissed about this ruling, the 6-3 majority, okay? He says, quote, whatever one may think about the current administration's enforcement of immigration laws, or the way ICE has conducted its operations, the protection of federal officers from potentially lethal attacks should not be thwarted. This is what Alito wrote, okay, in his dissent. And of course, we enter Governor J.B. Jellybean Pritzker. He took a victory lap. He applauded the court's decision. And in a statement, JB says, I'm glad that the Supreme Court has ruled that Donald Trump did not have the authority to deploy and federalize Guard in Illinois. This is an important step in curbing the Trump administration's consistent abuse of power and slowing Trump's march toward authoritarianism. My God. Now, before we, tuck our tails in and take this defeat, slow down there, Pritzker. Okay. You might have jumped the gun here a little bit because SCOTUS, Supreme Court of the United States, has not rendered a final ruling on this. Okay, the court emphasized that this was not issuing a final decision on the merits of the case, on whether the president had the authority to deploy the National Guard. It focuses on the emergency request before the court while sidestepping the overall issue. Okay, so there was an emergency request, and that was what was under the magnifying glass. was this emergency request. Like I said, it was sort of an emergency because the ICE agents were being attacked by agitators, and it was an emergency request he had placed. And the court sort of sidestepped this overall issue of if the president has the final or has the authority to do that, to deploy the National Guard, federalize the National Guard. They just were looking at the procedural, like, emergency request. Okay. So the court made it clear in their decision that this was not addressing the underlying constitutional questions, nor was it making a determination as to whether or not Trump's orders were lawful. Okay. And it notably, the decision here, like, JV is really jumping the gun when he's celebrating, because in the decision, it doesn't say anything about future deployments. Okay. It does not prevent future deployments. So with that in mind, they looked at the procedure of issuing this emergency request and getting the National Guard in there via emergency. Okay. That's what the Supreme Court ruled on. With that in mind, we've got to talk about John Yoo, and he's quoted in Red State. Was on Fox News, okay? And I watched the clip on Fox News, I believe on Tuesday, and he's the deputy assistant, was the deputy assistant attorney general under George W. Bush administration. And he has a different interpretation of this case, of the Supreme Court of the United States decision here. So Yoo appeared on Fox News America Reports, and he surmised that the decision may not mean what Pritzker and what they think it means. He pretty much said, like, whoa, hold on, my interpretation is much different. There's something else going on here with this interpretation. So Yoo says on Fox News, he says the statute says that the president has to be unable to enforce the law with regular forces. Okay, so what does regular forces mean? We don't know. The Supreme Court has never decided that question before. Before yesterday, the Supreme Court now says that regular forces mean you have to try, before you issue an emergency deployment of the National Guard, you have to use regular forces first as the president, okay? And regular armed forces force before you bring out the National Guard. Like I said, it's a procedural thing, and they were like, okay, you kind of jumped the gun here, President Donald Trump, in issuing an emergency order for the National Guard. You have to try to use regular armed forces first. Well, what the hell is regular armed forces? So you, on Fox News, he even talked about a precedent from a past president on how this could play out. So the unintended consequence here might be that the president is going to have to call the 82nd Airborne or the Marines or the 101st Airborne Division, as, for example, President Eisenhower did before Brown versus Board of Education in the South, to enforce desegregation. Okay, so this has already kind of happened before under President Eisenhower. After that Brown versus Board of Education court case, famous court case, he deployed the Marines, essentially the Army, or the Marines, to enforce desegregation. Okay, so this is a regular forces over the National Guardsmen. So this is fascinating stuff. President Donald Trump might have to do that stuff like Eisenhower did before calling out the National Guard. Okay, so to protect federal building, to protect federal officers, those ICE agents, if they fail, and if the ICE agents are under attack by agitators like they are in Chicago, then he can call out, like, the Marines. Okay, so I want you to take a listen to Yoo on Facebook or on Fox News. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, take a listen to him, and then we're going to come back. And then, I'm going to tell you what I think that this decision means. I think that the SCOTUS gave Donald Trump a layup. I think that this was like a Christmas present, a birthday gift to President Donald Trump. But take a listen.
He said, look, I'm trying to enforce the laws with ICE agents, with federal law enforcement, and I can't do it, so I need to call the National Guard. But the statute says the president has to be unable to enforce the law with regular forces. What does regular forces mean? We don't know. The Supreme Court has never decided that question before yesterday. The Supreme Court now says regular forces means you have to try with the regular armed forces first before you can bring out the National Guard. So the unintended consequence here might be that the president is going to have to call the 82nd Airborne or the Marines or the 101st Airborne Division, as, for example, President Eisenhower did after Brown versus Board of Education in the South to enforce desegregation. President Trump might have to do that first in order to protect those federal buildings, those ICE agents. And then if they fail, he can then call out the National Guard.
Got it. J.B. Pritzker, the governor in the state of Illinois, is saying this. Today is a big win for Illinois and American democracy. This is an important step in curbing the Trump administration's consistent abuse of power and slowing Trump's march toward authoritarianism. That's purely political. I think the president has obviously tried to work within the framework of the law as his legal eagles have seen it. 15 seconds or so. What happens from here? And I guess I answered my own question when I say I'm not surprised by Pritzker's response, and I guess you aren't either.
I'm not. He's, of course, injecting a lot of heated political rhetoric into this. Yeah. But what's going to happen? Trump will, of course, now have the right to go to the Supreme Court on the full merits. As you said, Kevin, this is just preliminary. He may be able to get the full court to reverse this preliminary decision. But second, and I think more worrisome, is the Supreme Court is essentially inviting President Trump to send regular armed troops and deploy those to Chicago and Los Angeles before he can send the National Guard. I think a governor would rather have National Guard troops than the 82nd Airborne and the Marine Corps patrolling the streets of Chicago.
Yeah, especially when you think of.
Okay, so this thing is going to backfire, I think. And maybe the Supreme Court did this sort of on purpose, or gave Donald Trump an opening here, but the Supreme Court decision is not on the merits. Okay, so when Governor J.B. Pritzker comes out and he says, yeah, his abuse of power and his march towards authoritarianism, this is not on the merits of the constitutionality of the president federalizing the National Guard. It's not on that. This is just a preliminary decision. And it was all on the procedural part of this where he issued or he deployed the National Guard via an emergency. Okay, and that's really what it was all about. It's not on the merits. So this is not the final word on the issue, particularly in light of Alito's dissent. And then you have the dissent of Justice Neil Gorsuch, and then the concurring opinion of Justice Brett Kavanaugh. In fact, you thinks that, as you heard, the Supreme Court of the United States is giving President Donald Trump an opening. He said, quote, second, I think that it's more worrisome that the Supreme Court is essentially inviting President Donald Trump to send in regular armed troops and deploy those to Chicago and Los Angeles before he can send the National Guard. So I think the governor would rather have the National Guard troops there rather than the 82nd Airborne and the Marine Corps patrolling the streets of Chicago. So one could naturally come to the conclusion that Governor J.B. Pritzker only cares about his polished presidential credentials. Okay, so I think that Governor J.B. Pritzker probably would love to see some unrest in the streets, some innocents die. That's my thoughts on here. Like, I think that he would be fine with the 82nd Airborne, the Marine Corps coming out into Chicago. I think he'd be totally fine with it because it does something for his presidential credentials. Okay. As you see more unrest, innocents die, violence in Chicago, ICE protest, he's like salivating, Governor J.B. Pritzker, at the mouth here at the thought of that, because at the thought of possibly President Donald Trump directing U.S. military troops, regular forces, to be rolled out into the state. This kind of gives Governor J.B. Pritzker a layup for his whole abuse of power authoritarianism argument. I mean, if you have President Donald Trump going in there with military, armed forces, the Marines, okay, he's going his whole BS, Governor J.B. Pritzker's BS about the abuse of power and authoritarianism could go over well with the leftist base, so that way he could secure a nomination for president. And I think that he wouldn't mind seeing the Marine deployed rather than the National Guard, because he's just salivating at the idea of coming out and saying, like, Donald Trump is weaponizing the military against citizens in Chicago. Okay, so, but that doesn't mean I don't think President Donald Trump should do it. I think President Donald Trump should do that. And then I think he should cuff JB and Brandon Johnson. I've said that for a very long time. But this decision, I think, really was the Supreme Court kind of providing an opening for Donald Trump to send in the military over the National Guard. The National Guard should be like the last resort, is what I was reading from the decision. And it was like procedural, like they took issue with him deploying the National Guard as an emergency when he should have been using regular forces. And we have precedent. Eisenhower, he did the same thing when it came to enforcing desegregation. So, yeah, not a win for JB, I don't think. I think that the next step would be President Donald Trump sending in regular military, like the Marines. That would be pretty cool. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. So do appreciate you being here this morning. President Donald Trump, the guy never sleeps. I checked my phone last night. I saw this happen and I was like, well, I'm doing news tomorrow. I was planning on like Christmas shows, all this week, but I was like, you know what? There's been a lot of news. So I'm just going to do news today. So President Donald Trump, he announced in a post on Truth Social that the United States military made good on its prior threats to wipe out terrorists in the northwestern part of Nigeria. Okay, so that was spreading all around Christmas Day, late Christmas Day. And these terrorists in the northwestern part of Nigeria, what they've been doing, eradicating Christians. Okay, so President Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth, they strongly condemned prior to these strikes the slaughter of Christians over there. And this has been something that Hegseth has, been in meetings with the Nigerian government about. Hey, on, November 1st, I think it was, Donald Trump wrote in a Truth Social post, quote, "If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria. It may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns ablazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities. I am hereby instructing the Department of War," Pete Hegseth, "to prepare for possible action. If we attack, it will be fast, vicious, and sweet, just like the terrorist thugs attack our cherished Christians. Warning, the Nigerian government better move fast." Okay, so this was back in November. And, when you put something out there like that, you've got to move, right? If they aren't stopping the slaughtering of these Christians, these ISIS radical terrorists, if that's still going on, he's got to make good on this threat, right? So President Donald Trump, Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, they condemned the slaughtering. They've been in meetings with the Nigerian government. They've been trying to get the killing of these Christians to stop. And they put out this threat, hey, you don't stop, we're going to come in guns ablazing. And you have to make good on that. So rapper Nicki Minaj helped make this a global issue. And she thanked President Donald Trump's administration for, really advocating for Christians, for her fellow Christians. She said she's a Christian. I know a lot of people are upset about Nicki Minaj being at AmFest. She actually talked about the mass killings by ISIS at AmFest, the heinous mass killings of Christians. She appeared at TPUSA's AmFest to speak about the terror attacks in Nigeria, and people are really upset. People say, like, oh, Nicki Minaj is a terrible role model, and, people are taking Charlie Kirk's clip there where he was actually talking about Cardi B and Nicki Minaj. I would say Nicki Minaj, now she has a cult-like themes in her songs. She has twerking, very terrible role model for young black women, for young girls, much like Taylor Swift, much like Cardi B. I will say, in comparison, Cardi B, Nicki Minaj makes Cardi B's music sometimes look like it's rated G. Okay, but Nicki Minaj cusses. But God can redeem anybody. And that's one thing that I noticed when I was watching her comments at TPUSA AmFest, was that God's been talking to her. And Nicki talked about this and having conversations with her. And she said, like, this appearance at AmFest means so much more to me than, and she said this, than all of my performances, and how God's been kind of tugging on her heart. And for her to come out and talk about the attack on Christians, the terror attacks that are going on in Nigeria, and most pastors don't even want to talk about this. Most conservative podcasters don't want to talk about this, the attacks on Christians in Nigeria. This was largely ignored. For her to do that, and some pastors don't even want to talk about that, was bold, courageous, and she also talked about really. Now, has she come out and denounced her music and denounced her prior actions? No, but I truly believe that's between you and God. Your sin, the confession of your sin, that's between you and God. But she did say that she's been talking with God, and she said that at AmFest. And we have to be careful. TPUSA, I've always said that I'm not a big fan of TPUSA, but this is not anything new. They did this with, I think her name's Nala Ray. She was an OnlyFans model, and they had her at speaking arrangements for TPUSA. And I always said that, hey, TPUSA, you got to be careful about who you allow to have a platform, because my pastor has always phrased it this way: baby Christians. Okay. You don't rely on baby Christians to go and preach the word. You give them a chance to grow in their faith. Okay. You don't throw them out there to go preach to the masses when they're just recently saved or born again. Okay. That's not fair to the baby Christian. And it's not fair to the masses. They're just not ready for that yet. It's a spiritual journey. It's a faith journey, and you grow in your faith as time goes on. And you get closer and closer as you confess that sin and repent of it to God. Okay. And I think that she's just starting out. And I've always said this about TPUSA, but this is nothing new for TPUSA. They bring out people like that all the time, where I'm like, I really hope that you're not giving this person, a huge platform to preach to people, to talk to people when they're just starting out in their faith journey. That would just be not a whole lot of common sense, or it's not common sense to do that. It's not fair to the individual who's just starting out their faith journey. It's not fair to others who are exposed to their immature faith. Okay. It's not fair. So I've always been critical of TPUSA for that. I was with Nala Ray. I am with Nicki Minaj. I don't think that they should be providing a platform, but Nicki Minaj wasn't really provided a platform. She did a sit down and answered questions and talked about her faith personal faith and her beliefs about the terrorist attacks in Nigeria with Erica Kirk. Like, they didn't just hand her the microphone and told her to go up there and start, preaching or lecturing these students at TPUSA. No. It was a sit down, and it was more like a interview conversation at AmFest, and that I am impressed with. So yeah, I wanted to address the Nicki Minaj thing. A lot of people are saying Kat, she's does TPSA actually think that she can Nicki Minaj will twerk us into winning 2028? And I'm like, look, folks, God can redeem anybody. Okay, anybody. Even the Nicki Minaj's who twerk and have witchcraft and sorcery themes in their music, which Nicki Minaj, Taylor Swift, name any pop artist, modern pop artist, and you can point out demonic themes in their songs. But I think that God can redeem anybody. And as long as TPUSA doesn't thrust her out there as, a speaker for TPUSA and give her the microphone solely alone, and as long as they don't have her preaching or influencing TPUSA students, I think that it was great to allow Nikki to come on and talk about her personal faith and talk about issues that concern her in the country. She's an American just like everybody else, right? So anyway, I want to get back to President Donald Trump and what's going on in Nigeria. But Nicki Minaj coming out courageously talking about the Christians being killed by ISIS terrorists, her talking about her personal faith, saying that she's been talking to God more. That's huge. And admirable. So in a Truth Social post, the president said the U.S. has begun airstrikes against ISIS. Okay, so here's what Trump wrote on Christmas yesterday. He said, "Tonight, at my direction as Commander-in-Chief, the United States launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria, who have been viciously killing primarily innocent Christians. They've been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians at levels not seen for many years and even centuries. I've previously warned these terrorists that if they do not stop slaughtering Christians, there would be hell to pay. And tonight there was. The Department of War executed numerous perfect strikes, as only the U.S. military is capable of doing. Under my leadership, our country will not allow radical Islamic terrorism to prosper. May God bless our military, and Merry Christmas to all, including the dead terrorists, of which there will be many more if their slaughter of Christians continue." He's not messing around here, folks. President Donald Trump is not screwing around. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth shared the president's post after the attack. And I want to talk about this because you're going to get a lot of America First people out there screaming about how Donald Trump is entering us into a foreign war with Nigeria. Not the case. Okay. So Hegseth, he was meeting with national security leaders from Nigeria, the Nigerian government, back in the fall of this year. Like I said, November 1st. The Secretary of War was having meetings with the government, and they were in cooperation with each other. Okay, so we're not really against Nigeria here. What we're against is radical Islamic terrorists killing Christians. Okay, and he had a meeting in the fall. Pete Hegseth did, and that meeting was with Nigerian officials, and they had hoped that they could end the persecution of Christians without any sort of military actions. They both came to the conclusion that they want the end of the persecution of Christians by these jihadist terrorists. They both want it to stop, and the government of Nigeria was willing to help. Okay. So, like, this isn't like against Nigeria. This is against the radicalism, the radical terrorism that is going on there. So here's what Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said back in November. He said, under the President of the United States leadership, the Department of War is working aggressively with Nigeria to end persecution of Christians by the jihadist terrorist. I met with Nigeria's national security advisor and his team to discuss the horrific violence against Christians in their country. And then he took pictures with the advisor. Okay, and he posted it. So I don't know about y'all, but I can't think of a better way to celebrate Christmas than avenging the death of Christians. Because really, I told you about Saint Nick. He was one of the early Christians, early church, 1st century to 4th century, and they were jailed and persecuted by the Roman Empire. Okay, for talking about Jesus. This is after Jesus died. Christians, I can't think of a better way to celebrate, Christmas than avenging the deaths of Christians. The death that radical Islamic terrorists justify. They justify the death of Christians through their warped ideology and religion. And I say death to all Islamic terrorists. And I want to be clear, this is not an attack on Nigeria. You're going to hear these conservatives, these Republicans say, I don't know if they've done it yet, but your Thomas Masseys, your Marjorie Taylor Greens, and I'm not anti-Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think that Thomas Massey has great ideas. I think that he's right. He tried to go after the president's war powers, and get him to stop issuing these strikes against the Venezuelan drug boats. Okay, because he said that this is an act of war, and he proposed a resolution which ultimately failed. Because guess what? Every president has issued strikes. In fact, Barack Obama probably issued more strikes than Donald Trump, Joe Biden, the last few presidents combined. Okay, and it's just silly. You have to have some sort of element of surprise. You have to have the commander-in-chief be the actual commander-in-chief. Now, declaration of war, that's different. You do need congressional approval for that. I think that's kind of stupid to begin with, but it is constitutional, right? The declaration of war. You have to go to Congress because all of our Congress members, like, let's be real, they are not in the interest of the United States. A bunch of them are globalists. They are not Americans. Okay. And I think that it defeats the purpose of war. You got to have some sort of element of surprise. And I think that the executive branch should definitely have all the war power, should be able to declare war. I think the president should be able to declare war on his own. But I know that's not constitutional. I think that it should be looked at. It would be nice to look at that and change it. It'd be nice. But I get it, right? And I can kind of tip my hat to Thomas Massey here for introducing such a resolution, because at least he's, getting people thinking about the Constitution, and he's a constitutionalist, and I respect that. But you're going to hear a lot of people on the right say, oh, he's getting us into a foreign war. No, he's killing terrorists. This is not a new war, you idiots. Okay. And they did it in cooperation with the government of Nigeria, obviously. So the Islamists here, and I want to play this video. This guy, the Islamists, torched his home, his church, and he slaughtered 150 members of this guy's congregation. And I just want to play this clip because I think that a lot of people don't understand the gravity. It's hard because it's so far away. African countries, like, do we really care about them? There's only a few that you actually could probably name: Somalia, Nigeria, and that's about it. But these Islamists, they torched this guy's congregation and his church, and they slaughtered Christians. And There's this ongoing campaign to wipe out Christians in Nigeria, and it can't be ignored anymore. Let's take a listen to this guy.
So I am Reverend Yakubu Muton. I am a pastor with the Church of Christ in Nations. But this is my village. This is Mayanga. Mayanga is in Bokos local government, Plateau State of Nigeria. What really happened here is not only in this village that were affected by this crisis. We're affected by more than 11 villages, which Mayanga happens to be one. And in these villages, it is the same method of attack that was conducted. It's the killing, the maiming of people, slaughtering them, and burning of their houses and their foodstuffs and properties. So by now, by the record we have already collected, we have over 150 people that are killed in one day. That is on the 24th of December. That is, the Christmas was just not a Christmas to us, like to celebrate. It was a mourning Christmas because of what happened to us. As you could see, I'm standing here. This is my house in my village, and I lost everything that was in the house, both food stuff, clothing, and whatever. It was a furnished house, but it is burnt. And even the church that is by my side was burnt, and the pastorium is burnt. Everything about us here in this village is confused. As you could see, that everything is destroyed. But we thank God that some of us are alive. And at the cost of this, like me now, I lost 7 of my brothers at the cost of this crisis that happened. Thank you.
So sad, very sad. 150 members of this congregation. I don't want to be clear. This is not just in Nigeria. And this is why I think President Donald Trump acted swiftly. And he did this on Christmas. It's because it's starting to get really out of hand now. And, shame on conservatives who say that there is not a global threat when it comes to Islam. There is most definitely a global threat when it comes to Islam. Look at the 2 Muslims, or look at the 2 National Guard soldiers who were shot by radical Muslims. Look at the 2 American soldiers in Syria, and there was an interpreter who was murdered by radical ISIS. There was an attack there. Look at what happened in Australia. I think it was like, I don't even remember the death toll. I think it was like 16 the last time I looked. But the it was a Hanukkah celebration, and there was a Jewish celebration, and all the Jews, died in Australia at this. I think it was 16 died. So Muslims have also been murdering thousands of Christians in Nigeria, South Africa, and Europe. And nobody is safe with Muslims around. And we've got to bomb every terrorist on earth. Okay. So take a listen to this video. Here we go.
Breaking moments ago, President Trump announcing a powerful strike against the Islamic State in Nigeria. Let's go back to Madison Scarpino live in West Palm Beach with the breaking details. Madison?
Yeah, Mike, President Trump says that strike was deadly, and he says it's because they've been targeting and viciously killing primarily Christians. Now, he just made the announcement on Truth Social saying in part, quote, "I have previously warned these terrorists that if they did not stop the slaughtering of Christians, there would be hell to pay." And tonight there was. The Department of War executed numerous perfect strikes, as only the United States is capable of doing. Under my leadership, our country will not allow radical Islamic terrorism to prosper. May God bless our military, and Merry Christmas to all, including the dead terrorists, of which there will be many more if their slaughter of Christians continues. Now, Mike, as many of our viewers know, this is an issue in Africa that has caught the president's attention for a bit now. He's previously lashed out on the country's government for having done nothing to stop the killing. His administration has even met with the Nigerian officials to discuss the issue, even threatening to cut off aid to the country. So some major breaking news on this Christmas night. We are expecting a lot of reaction from Congress, and we're following it all. Mike?
Madison Scarpino doing a great job on the breaking news. Madison, thanks a lot.
Okay. I wanted to give you some more context there. The Nigeria federal government has confirmed. I saw this early in the morning. They put out a statement. They have confirmed that there is full ongoing and ongoing security and intelligence cooperation with the United States after President Donald Trump's devastating precision airstrikes. Okay, so they were devastating. They were quick. They were perfect, and they obliterated the ISIS terrorists that were positioned in the northwest of Nigeria. Okay, but this is crucial when somebody says, "Oh, Donald Trump is getting us into foreign wars. He's bombing, Venezuela. He's bombing Nigeria." Not true. He's bombing TDA when it comes to Venezuela. They're designated terrorists through the 1798 Aliens Enemies Act of the United States. They have been deemed, these Tren de Agua Venezuelan drug peddlers, they've been deemed terrorist. Okay, and he has full authority to strike them, just like he has full authority here. That War Powers Resolution died. All presidents have issued strikes. Okay. And this isn't against the country of Nigeria. Nigeria is working with President Donald Trump on this. Okay. And they just confirmed, even after the strikes, that they're still working. Okay. So they're sharing intel. There's structured collaboration going on here when it comes to these deadly hits on the radical Islamic scum who are targeting these Christians, these innocent Christians. So Trump is delivering real protection worldwide. Okay. And our partners are stepping up and helping us in protecting our own, which are Christians. We are a Christian nation. We should be protecting Christians. So more strikes may be needed. So we'll have to keep you updated on that. But God bless our military. God bless President Donald Trump. That was huge, issuing those strikes. I woke up this morning fully anticipating that there was going to be no news. And then I was like, oh, wait, look what President Donald Trump did in Nigeria. I got to talk about that. So smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Ladies and gentlemen, patriots, freedom lovers, truth seekers, and all of those who still believe in the Constitution, welcome back to the Conservative Cat Show. This is where we believe liberty comes from God, rights come from our Creator, and government power should always be questioned. This is the show where we question government power, especially when it shows up at your front door with a clipboard and a fine. And that kind of brings me to today's story. Today we are talking about Illinois Senate Bill 8. Okay, so this is the Safe Gun Storage Act, the so-called Safe Gun Storage Act, and lots of components of this act are going to go into effect January 1st. Supporters are popping the champagne. They're excited about this taking effect. Gun control groups are, jumping for joy. But our law-abiding gun owners, they are being handed criminal liability, civil liability, new reporting requirements. They've got to report things. There are really subjective standards that we've got to talk about once again that put the burden of crime prevention on the innocent and on law-abiding citizens, which is just BS. So the same political class that won't lock up our violent offenders because of the Safety Act. There was somebody who was lit on fire, quite literally, on a Chicago transit train. And this person had been in and out of jail and was known to law enforcement 70 times. I think he was arrested 70 times. Okay, so they can't keep violent offenders off of the street, this political class. They can't keep them locked up. Now they want to make sure your firearms are locked up. Okay, so I want to slow down a little bit, read through the fine print of this law, and let's look at this with constitutional clarity, a biblical perspective, truth, and I want to provide some common sense, because really safety without liberty is not safety at all. Okay, so according to the Center Square, supporters of Senate Bill 8 include gun control advocacy groups, groups like Giffords. They are celebrating Illinois and they gave Illinois an A+ grade, an A grade, okay, on their annual gun law scorecard, Gifford's annual gun law scorecard. Okay, so Gifford's executive director Emma Brown, she's quoted. She put out a statement and she said, "Common sense laws, gun laws, stop crime, save lives, and Illinois is proof of just how effective they can be." Yes, I had to read that without laughing, but I did laugh. So let's pause right there. Illinois, Chicago. This is the Midwest, like the murder capital of the Midwest, the murder capital of the world. Okay, it's insanity. How many people die in Chicago? Not even close to Washington, D.C. And that should tell you something. Our consecutive, I think it's been 13 consecutive years, we've been the murder capital of the world, or of the country. So yeah, I can't believe people say that with a straight face, that Illinois is proof of just how effective gun laws are. Is it? Because violent crime continues, despite having some of the strictest gun laws in the nation. In fact, I would probably make the argument that because of the strict gun laws, that is why this state sees such rampant violent crime. We've got the strictest gun laws in the nation, and somehow violent crime being rampant, us having the murder capital of the nation 13 years in a row, apparently that's proof that gun laws work. Okay. People are crazy. It's kind of like giving an award to a kitchen, this Gifford's gun advocacy group. They gave an award to Illinois. It's kind of like giving a Michelin star. So this is like an award for restaurants. It's kind of like giving a Michelin star to a kitchen that's on fire, a restaurant where their kitchen is on fire. Okay, like, no, you wouldn't give an award because, like, clearly violence isn't down in Illinois and Chicago. It's been 13 years since we've been at the tippity top. So supporters say that the law strengthens domestic violence protections, invests $19 million of taxpayer funds into community violence intervention programs. So those are programs like the Peacekeeper program, where we take that $19 million and we pay ex-convicts to go out and play guidance counselor. Okay, so they put on a cute little yellow vest and they go out there and try to talk down the violent gang member. And there have been multiple reports about these peacekeepers actually not doing anything to combat violence or be a guidance counselor or try to talk these violent criminals off the edge. In fact, some of these peacekeepers are going out in their yellow vests, $200 a day, taxpayer funds, and they're taking people, ripping them out of the cars, putting their faces on the curb and stomping their faces in to the point where they need. No, this actually happened in Chicago. I know what you're thinking. No, Kat, that's just crazy talk. No, that's actually happened. A peacekeeper paid with taxpayer dollars, wearing the peacekeeper vest while he committed the crime, caught on video, bashed a guy's face in so badly he needed reconstructive surgery. So that's who we're paying with taxpayer dollars. The supporters say that the law requires safer firearm storage. Sounds so warm, sounds so caring. Always does, doesn't it? But remember, this is not common sense. Okay, their common sense, they say this is common sense gun legislation. Their common sense is actually someone else decides what makes sense for you. That's their common sense. It's draconian, it's tyrannical. So I want to talk about what the law actually does. Okay, so Senate Bill 8, what it does to you, the gun owner. So what do you need to know if you're a gun owner in Illinois? So Senate Bill 8, firearms have to be stored and securely locked if anyone in the household is not legally eligible to handle a firearm. This is craziness. Okay, so I don't have a FOID card for many reasons. One of the reasons being I don't want to be on some sort of registry. Okay, I don't have to worry about it too much anymore because got the hell out of Pritzker. But I didn't have a FOID card. Didn't want to be on the gun registry, or I didn't want the government knowing. I would just my husband had a FOID card. And you can shoot at the range with somebody who has a FOID card. Okay. And I just never got a FOID card. Okay. So under this bill, my husband would have had to lock up his guns because anyone in the household, not legally eligible to handle a firearm. Okay. So I didn't have a FOID. I wasn't legally eligible to handle a firearm. This is ridiculous. You've got kids in the household, and you got to have a FOID card in order to legally handle a firearm, I guess. So this is very subjective. I don't know what the hell they're talking about, right? You got to lock up all of your firearms, essentially, if you have a wife and kids. Okay. And if your kids don't have FOID cards, if your, wife doesn't have a FOID card, you got to lock it all up. So according to U.S. Law Shield President Kirk Evans, he told the Center Square, quote, "If it's not on your person, then you have to lock it up and securely lock it up. You have to have it locked up and securely locked up." So this isn't guidance. This is a mandate. They're telling you that you have to lock up firearms in your own house. Okay, so this law also raises the age threshold from 14 to 18, meaning if you have the minor in the home, even one who's trained, responsible, and raised properly, knows how to deal with firearms, you are legally obligated to lock up that firearm. So what they're doing here is essentially saying, if you don't have a FOID card, you're in a household with somebody who has a FOID card, that person with the FOID card is legally obligated to lock up his or her firearms at all times, unless it's physically on your person, like you're concealing it in your home. So much for parental judgment, letting parents decide, hey, I want to lock up this firearm. I want to have this firearm on my desk, so much for just living your life in your house. Crazy, right? We've got shotguns, just kind of hanging up, you know what I mean? Not in a safe, but hanging up. I mean, this is just so ridiculous. And here's where it really gets dangerous. Okay. Senate Bill 8 adds 2 categories of people not allowed to access firearms. Here's where it gets crazy. They say prohibited persons and at-risk persons. Okay, and this is where the law crosses into unconstitutional and unworkable. Okay, so Kirk Evans, he says, quote, "How in the world are you going to know somebody's criminal history?" Okay, we just had Thanksgiving and Christmas. You've got people coming into your house. Okay, now that could be your daughter-in-law, your son-in-law, your friends, your friends, your dog's friend. Okay, you got people coming into your house for the holidays. Okay, how in the hell are you supposed to know if somebody is a prohibited person, can't legally obtain a firearm or can't legally handle a firearm in the state of Illinois? How are you supposed to know if they're a prohibited person or an at-risk person, whatever the hell that means? Okay, are you required, right outside your front door, as people are coming in for Christmas dinner, right? You're sitting there camped out in front of your door. You get a chair, you got a laptop, and you're just saying, okay, name, license plate, social security, and you start running background checks on all of your guests that come into your home. This is so unworkable. Okay, your adult child, your visiting cousin, a family member staying over for the holidays. What exactly is an at-risk person in the eyes of the state? Okay, is it somebody with prior mental health issues? Mental health issues now? Maybe you made a dumb post online. Maybe you voted for President Donald Trump. Who's an at-risk individual? Someone who someone else claims is dangerous, but isn't actually dangerous, right? what the hell is going on here? This is so unworkable. And here's how Evans puts it. Evans is the director here of Law Shield, Kirk Evans. Here's how he puts it. He says, how are you going to know if they posted on Facebook that they're going to shoot up a school? Okay. Like, say, your sister comes over and she's got a troubled child. Okay. And she doesn't really talk to you about the kid's problems. And the kid actually, and she doesn't even know, maybe the mother, like your sister, doesn't even know that the kid put out there on Facebook that he was going to shoot up a school. Okay. So you've got no idea, the situation going on. The sister doesn't know that he put that up on there on Facebook, her kid. This means gun owners are now expected to police the mental states of people, the criminal histories of people, online behavior of everyone around them. Okay. Or they risk massive penalties. That's where the law gets so effed up. Okay. Because if you don't keep your guns locked up from prohibited persons or at-risk persons, if you don't keep your guns locked up from those people, you're at risk of massive penalties. Okay. This is not law enforcement. This is deputizing citizens into a surveillance state. Okay. They want the citizenry to kind of conduct surveillance on their own family members. Okay. And the law has also shortened a reporting window if your firearm is stolen or lost. Okay. So it shortens it from 72 hours to 48 hours. So if you miss that deadline, okay, maybe you don't even realize immediately that your firearms are stolen. Okay. You're busy working. You work on for a couple of days traveling. Okay. And you've got a house and you've got some guns. Maybe you were hospitalized. Too bad. Okay. You don't get the 72 hours anymore. You get 48 days to figure out if your gun's been stolen. And if your stolen firearm was not secure in a safe and later used in a crime, civil penalties can reach up to $10,000. Okay. You're going to pay $10,000 if you don't report it. And if it's later used in a crime and you've got 48 hours to report it stolen, you might not even know it's stolen. So let me be clear. You are now in the state of Illinois financially liable for the actions of criminals. You, the victim, have to pay $10,000. And the criminal, gets off scot-free via the Safety Act. Like, even though you were the victim of theft, and even though the state routinely releases violent criminals, the criminal gets the plea deal, gets off on the Safety Act, you get a fine of $10,000. This is a messed up state, okay? This is Illinois governance in a nutshell. So screwed up. And what they're trying to do is pit you against your own family members and get you to surveil your own family members and your own friends, okay? So opponents of Senate Bill 8 warned correctly that this law makes home defense more difficult. And that matters. The big part of this is that they're mandating that you lock up your firearms, essentially. Like, if you have kids, you've got to lock them up. Okay. And it makes home defense all that much more difficult. And it matters because seconds count. Like, the police are, especially if you're in the city of Chicago, 30 minutes, I think, is like the average response time or something like that. Something crazy. So the police are if not minutes away, an hour away, especially if you're rural too. And the seconds count. Okay. Because criminals, they're not storing their guns safely. Okay. The mother's defending their children at home. They've got to get the time to unlock this huge safe, this biometric safe at 2 a.m. in the morning. And the founders understood this, that the Second Amendment is not about sport. Okay. It's not about hunting. You don't need the government. Gun rights are human rights. This is about the natural right God gives you to defend yourself. And it's affirmed by scripture. You've got Jesus himself saying in Luke 22, verse 36, If you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. Okay, so that's not a call to violence. It was a recognition of a fallen world. We live in a fallen world where there are bad people. And the Illinois lawmakers seem to be so determined to legislate as if evil can be regulated out of existence. You can't regulate evil out of existence. It's always going to be there. People kill people. Guns don't kill people. So let's zoom out here. Illinois releases repeat offenders all the time. Like I said, the recent story with the Chicago Transit, she was on the bus or on the train, and then she was set on fire by somebody who was released 70 times. Okay, so Illinois refuses to enforce existing laws consistently. So that's the beauty of all of this. Like they craft so much gun legislation out there, and I've talked about this before, where there's been cases where, I mean, I think it was like a homicide suicide in Bloomington, and he like was supposed to have his firearms confiscated, and they were never confiscated. Like they've got laws in the books, like because he had, prior convictions, and he was supposed to get his, guns confiscated because he hadn't registered, or he hadn't, renewed his FOID card renewals, right? You've got to renew them, and if they're expired, and he was supposed to have his firearms confiscated, and the state doesn't even enforce existing laws. So if you don't renew your FOID card, or if it goes expired and you have guns, and convictions, and they're supposed to be confiscated, the state won't even go and confiscate that. So they're not even enforcing the laws that exist currently. We spend millions of dollars, Illinois, on these programs. And like I said, these programs are complete BS. The Peacekeepers Initiative, the crime intervention programs. Essentially what they are is really, it's just voter drive. They're paying people to be operatives of the Democrat Party. That's what it is. They're paying typically mentally ill people and ex-convicts to go out and do their bidding. Really, that's what that's all about, lobbying. So a lot of these people in the crime intervention programs, you'll see them at the state house. They wear these orange shirts, and they go and they lobby their lawmakers for money. So they pay them to go lobby, essentially, for more money for these intervention programs. And the people at the tippity top of these programs are making $200,000 or something crazy. So we spend millions on these programs. There's no accountability with these programs. How are they actually addressing the violence in Chicago? Are they bringing that violence down? Oh, the answer is no. Well, we'll give him $19 million with this bill anyway, Senate Bill 8. And really what Illinois does, it tightens restrictions on people who already obey the law. Okay, so this is not about safety, it's about control. A controlled population is easy to manage. A disarmed population is easy to govern. A confused population is easy to manipulate. And the law here is very vague, very subjective. I don't think anybody can really comply with it perfectly. And that's not a fluke. Okay, that's not something that they, we kind of forgot to, clarify what an at-risk person is and your obligations as a law-abiding gun owner. We forgot. No, it's all by design. Excuse me. They wrote it vague so it would confuse you, so you can't comply with it perfectly. And they can come in and fine you and punish you for not complying with the law. That's what this is all about. It's about control. So it takes effect, a big portion of it, major components of it takes effect January 1st. And here's the truth. Illinois didn't earn an A for gun safety. Okay, it earned an A for bureaucratic arrogance. And the law doesn't do anything to stop criminals or prevent gang violence. It doesn't address the real drivers of crime. What it does do, it criminalizes ordinary behavior. It shifts the responsibility from the state to families. It forces you to perform surveillance on your friends and family, anybody who enters your home. Okay, it undermines your right to self-defense. Okay, keeping your guns locked up. Some people do, some people don't. Some people keep some guns locked up. Some people keep others, on their desk. And you're undermining somebody's right to self-defense if they want to have one gun on their desk, ready to go, no safe. What's so wrong about that? I don't get it. But they mandate that you place your liberty behind lock and key. And that's the real problem here with this bill. It just locks up your liberty and undermines your right to self-defense. Okay, smash that like button. Subscribe to the channel. I definitely need you to subscribe. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about, I think I'm going to get to Joe Biden today. Joe Biden and his family took this really awkward photo. And I got to tell you about it. And then maybe we'll get to the Starbucks employees complaining, bitching and moaning that they're not making $100,000 a year. So we're going to be right back. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Welcome to Conservative Cat Clips, the show that cuts through the noise with claws out truth and unapologetic common sense. I'm your host, Kat. No fluff, just facts. Today, we're tackling the topic mainstream media would rather tiptoe around, and that's abortion, its history, its turning point, and what's happening now and where it's headed. Let's start with the past. In 1973, the Supreme Court handed down Roe v. Wade, and just like that, abortion became legal nationwide. It wasn't voted on. It wasn't in the Constitution. It was judicial activism, plain and simple. And over the next 49 years, over 60 million unborn lives were lost under this illusion that it was just healthcare, that this is just healthcare. Fast forward to the game changer, June 24th, 2022. Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization. The court finally corrected course, overturned Roe, and returned the power back to the states. Cue the media meltdown. But guess what? That's what democracy looks like. Local, real control. Right now, it's a state-by-state battle. Red states are passing laws to protect unborn life, some with heartbeat bills, others with total bans. Blue states, on the other hand, are sprinting forward, abortion on demand, some even pushing abortion access up until birth. That's not progressive, that's extreme. And here's where it gets even messier. Abortion pills. The latest front in this fight. The FDA greenlit mail-order abortion pills with almost no oversight. Think about that. A teenager can get these powerful drugs sent to her door without even seeing a doctor. Safe? Hardly. But the Biden administration, they were all in, treating abortion like it's the crown jewel of their social agenda. What's next? The future of abortion is being written right now. The state legislatures, in the courts, and in the culture, and at the ballot box. Conservatives are stepping up, passing strong protections, supporting crisis pregnancy centers, promoting adoption reform, and standing firm with both the mother and the child. Here's the bottom line. The fight isn't over. It's just begun, and we're no longer playing defense, though. We're shaping the culture. One law, one vote, and one voice at a time. This has been Conservative Cat Clips, where the truth cuts deep and the values stand tall, and we don't apologize for standing up for life. Hey, smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel if you want to support the program. Subscribing is the best way to do it, but you can also visit, I'm looking for my bottle here. Here it is. Patriot Pump Energy. Now this one's empty because, yeah, I'm obsessed with it. So they don't stay full very long, but I kept this one. And this is Patriot Pump Energy pre-workout, and you can get this for $10 off right now at checkout. Conservative Cat is the promo code, and this has 150 milligrams of caffeine paired with black pepper extract, so your caffeine energy doesn't wear out. That black pepper extract makes it last a little bit longer. So I highly recommend you go try the product out. PatriotPumpEnergy.com. Use promo code ConservativeCat. Now, I do want to share this with you. It's a photo, a family photo. It's a Christmas photo. And it's got people talking because of how it depicts Joe Biden. And I'm kind of sad for Joe. This is really kind of sad. Look at this family photo. Hold on. Right away, just tell me, what you think about it in the comment section. Like, you can't even see Joe's face. Like, Jill is covering him up. I can't see Joe Biden. Okay. So, yeah, people are talking about it. Joe Biden or whoever runs his X account, they posted this photo of him and his family on Christmas Eve. The photo immediately had people talking on social media because there's a little bit of a problem here with the picture. Joe is not really able to be seen at all. Maybe a sliver of his face is able to be seen in the picture. Hunter Biden was featured prominently right in center there. He's got his young son, Beau, in front of him. Jill and her daughter, Ashley, were on either side of Hunter. Okay. They were on either side of Hunter. And then you've got Hunter's 3 daughters by his first wife in the back row there. Okay, so you got Jill and Ashley there by Joe. Jill is really covering up Joe Biden's face there. And you've got Hunter's, 3 daughters. And they captioned the photo, or whoever is running, the person behind Joe Biden's X account. We know Joe's not tweeting. Okay. This is what they captioned this photo. They said, "Wishing you a peaceful and joyful Christmas Eve filled with love." You can't see Joe in the picture, and this would be the person, I would think, considering he was, I don't know, the president of the United Flippin' States, and this is the guy, the family head, the head of the household, right? He's the elder, here. I would think that you would want to prominently feature him. But no, he was in the back row and he's barely visible and he's blocked by Jill Biden. Some people even thought that the image was photoshopped and they photoshopped Joe in. And, others on social media were kind of like talking about where's Waldo? Like, where's Waldo jokes? Like, oh, did they just Photoshop Joe in? His family buried him in the back of this Christmas photo, and then he posted it to his own account, which is insane. Absolute savages, his family. I think, and this just goes to show, I feel so bad for this guy. They should have never pushed him out there in 2020. He was dementia. I think, I've told you about my little conspiracy theory here. I think that he suffered from a massive stroke shortly before the 2020 campaign. And that's why he wasn't campaigning. He was campaigning in his basement because they were shielding him from the public. But this photo is like equivalent to a 10-second video with 8 jump cuts. You guys remember when Joe Biden, he went live for the nation? Well, it wasn't actually live because there was this massive jump cut in the video, but they went live. It seems really odd, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's odd placement for Joe Biden, but it's kind of consistent because even when Joe occupied the Oval Office, he was always missing, like all of the time. Compare and contrast that with President Donald Trump. He's constantly available. I constantly see him engaging with press, whereas Joe Biden always seemed to be hiding from the press. They hid him from the press, his staff. Never got to see, Joe Biden. Donald Trump, in contrast, he hosts the press in the Oval Office. So I know we'd like to forget that Joe even held Oval Office or occupied the Oval Office, whatever it was. But you would think his family would put him in the front row. Am I right? I mean, either way you look at this thing, it's odd. And it looked a bit like this picture, where this picture where he was an afterthought. I've got another one here I'm going to share with you. This picture kind of also makes him kind of look like an afterthought. And I don't know. I just feel really bad for the guy. Take a look. Here we go. Yeah, kind of like put all the way in the back there. Kind of like an afterthought. Yeah, it's just kind of sad. So I also want to note here about that Christmas photo. Navy Joan Roberts, which is Hunter's other child out of wedlock by London Roberts. She's not featured in the Christmas photo, and Joe Biden seemed to have problems acknowledging this granddaughter's existence, Navy Roberts, because, and I'll play this video, he seemed to, forget her again, not only in this Christmas photo, but here he is, not including her last year or acknowledging her last year. Take a listen.
Future for all of America, a future for my daughters, my 4 granddaughters.
My 4 granddaughters. Yeah, well, you've got more. You've got Navy Roberts, who was born out of wedlock. Navy Roberts, her stocking wasn't hung up. This little girl, her stocking wasn't hung up at the White House. She's largely been ignored, dismissed by the Bidens. They don't acknowledge her as a granddaughter, clearly. So it's going to be more peaceful and joyful. The caption was, "We're wishing you a peaceful and joyful Christmas." Yeah, well, it's more peaceful and joyful now that Joe Biden is out of the Oval Office. I'm going to be honest with you, and we have a leader in charge. And I'm just grateful he's out of there. Joe Biden. All right, let's get to Starbucks. We've got a worker here that I got to talk with you about. According to one Starbucks worker, they are living off 99-cent iced tea and spaghetti and meatballs out of a can because this them Starbucks worker is making a wage that the left would not define as livable. Starbucks employees, they make pretty decent money. I mean, I don't know how much. I think it varies, but $15 an hour is what I've heard. 16, 17, up to $20 an hour. If you're management, even more than that. That's pretty insane. It kind of depends on where you're living and what state you're in. But I don't know when it became Starbucks is your career. You have to live on this. It's unclear when a Starbucks career is when it's, thought of to be a 6-figure income, or you should get a 6-figure income for working at Starbucks. Okay. But these nationwide, you've got these employees who won't stop until they get that, like a 6-figure income. Okay. It's not designed for you to, livable, whatever that is for you. It's not really designed to be that kind of job. It's a barista job. Sure, maybe you can get a car, maybe a small little apartment, but it's not designed to be like this 6-figure income. I mean, because you're making coffees at the end of the day, and what kind of value is there? Not to say that they shouldn't be paid, for what their value is. Yes, certainly. I'll pay you as much as it requires of you to work and pour coffee and make a coffee. But take a listen to this them. Here we go.
Hi, my name is Yari. Pronouns he, she, they, and I've been a barista with Starbucks for about 2.5 years. I am out here because I am sick and tired of living paycheck to paycheck. I haven't been to a grocery store in months. I'm surviving off of 99-cent iced tea and spaghetti and meatballs from a can.
All right, I've just got to jump in. This individual, now I'm pregnant, very, very chunky. You guys can see it in my face. But I'm going to be honest with you. When I look at this individual, I don't think Oh, he hasn't been to a grocery store in months. I'm sorry, objectively. And like, this is a very nice pea coat he's got on. I don't know how much this hat costed him, but not looking like he's impoverished. Am I right? Objectively, throw it in the comment section. Maybe I'm wrong, but definitely looks like he has three meals a day at least.
In my convenience store next to my house because that is what I can afford. Brian Nichol made $96 million in 4 months last year, and here I am struggling to get by. I'm tired of not having a livable wage. I'm tired of surviving. I want to live. I'm tired of an understaffed store. There's like 6 stations and only 2 people on the floor. That is not possible. We are only human. We're not machines. I am sick and tired of not being able to turn off mobiles and then higher ups getting upset that we're backed up on bar. Like, it would all be so much better if we were under contract. And I am here to get under contract and fight for.
Hold on a second. I'm pretty sure that's a snack in his hand, like a donut or something. Like, you're such a freaking liar. I'm surviving on iced tea and spaghetti and meatballs in a can. What is that in your hand? I know that is a half-eaten donut. You asshole. What?
The rights that I, as a human being, deserve just as much as anyone else.
Come on. He's got a donut in his hand, folks. A donut. Oh, gosh, that just makes me so mad. Anyway, employees all over the country, they're on strike. Starbucks employees, and they're calling on the company to end union busting and finalize a fair union contract. According to Starbucks Workers United, as the holiday rush sets in for Starbucks, union baristas, historic Red Cup rebellion grew again in strength and power Thursday as hundreds of new union Starbucks baristas across the country joined the unfair labor practice strike, the ULP strike. Union baristas open-ended ULP strike began on Red Cup Day, November 13th, and has gained momentum and solidarity from supporters each week since. Over 100 state and local elected officials sent letters to Starbucks on Wednesday calling for the company to end union busting and finalize a fair union contract. Oh my gosh. As the holiday season, this is a quote from Isabel Gonzalez, who is a barista, 3-year barista from California. She says, quote, as the holiday season ramps up, our movement is growing in power. For every one barista on strike, dozens more allies have shown up in force to back our cause. Her pronouns are she, her, by the way, in case you were worried. Isabel Gonzalez. She walked out on ULP strike this Thursday. Starbucks cannot power the holidays without baristas like me, she says. We're critical to the entire Starbucks experience. That's why we won't stop fighting until Starbucks stops union busting and we win the fair contract that we need to help us thrive. Now, while I can get behind the idea that baristas should be fairly compensated, this is not a job that requires competence, clearly.
Hi, my name is Yari. Pronoun.
Like, clearly doesn't require competence. And, you know, it's kind of comical how the they-thems talk about, you know, the CEO salaries and, you know, that money should be given to baristas. And just breaking it down, according to him, this they-them that I just played for you, Brian Nichol made $96 million in 4 months. Okay, the CEO, the salary. Okay, he had a 4-month salary of $96 million. It explains why my coffee's so high. But if you get rid of the entire salary and give it to the 380,000 employees nationwide, each employee would probably get about $200 for that 4 months, $252. That's it. You know, they're calling for Brian Nichol not to have the $36 million or $96 million 4-month salary. And if they got rid of that salary entirely and redistributed it to the baristas, they're just getting $200 for that 4 months. Okay. And I mean, I guess for 99 cents, if he's buying the iced teas for 99 cents, he could have 200 iced teas or 200 cans of spaghetti and meatballs. That's 200 cans. But that's the best they would get if a CEO donated his entire 4-month salary. Okay. So, in other words, they can increase their salary, the Starbucks workers, but that would mean more overpriced coffee for you, which would be more expensive, meaning fewer people would go. Like, you're probably seeing this demand at Starbucks, but it's on the verge. Like, most people aren't going to spend $12 for a coffee. Okay. And that's what's going to happen if you are demanding these salary increases or these wage increases. Okay. You're going to have fewer people go to Starbucks. Fewer people are going to be able to afford, in comparison to a $7 cup of coffee, $8 or $12 cup of coffee. Okay. Fewer people are going to afford it. That means you end up with less demands, which means you end up with fewer employees. And this could mean that extra $200 would turn into zero real quick, right? If the them is, let go, because the demand isn't there anymore, because you've raised the prices to meet the salary of the workers. And, I don't get it. You do the math. Like, these people are going to be let go if they demand these outrageous, like, I think he said, like, oh, the boss won't let us stop mobile orders coming through. Like, yeah, I don't understand why you don't want to take the orders of people via mobile orders. I don't understand. That's kind of an outrageous ask, in my opinion. But that being said, if they truly deserve a higher wage, they've got to make a convincing argument for that. And, this whole give me more, but I'm not valuable because I could be replaced tomorrow because lots of people can learn how to make a Starbucks coffee. Okay. This whole give me more, although I'm not very valuable and you could replace me tomorrow, it's not appealing to me. Okay. It's not appealing. And I don't know what you think, but I think that there's something going on here. And this has been a generational argument for quite some time. And how boomers, nothing against boomers, love the boomers, but they do say this all of the time. These kids don't want to work. Okay. And it always ends with like these millennial types, Gen Z types rolling their eyes and tuning out. These kids just don't want to work anymore. Now, I'm sure that this guy's not working very hard. But, maybe he is like taking a lot of orders. Maybe it is understaffed a little bit. You know what I mean? And maybe it's tough some days. Okay. But boomers say that, they just don't want to work. Okay. And I don't necessarily think that that's true all of the time. Okay. Both sides are partially right. But both sides are kind of missing the real issue here. And boomers are going to get mad. Millennials are going to get mad when I say this. But boomers were raised in a world where work usually paid off. Okay. You showed up, you stayed late, you never complained. And eventually you got your house, you got your pension, you got your financial stability. And that lesson kind of made sense in that era. But boomers, they didn't pass down wisdom. Okay. They passed down this idea. It's like muscle memory. Like if you just work and you grind and grind and grind and grind, you're going to have everything that you want. And that was true for their generation, but we're living in a different economic time right now. And they didn't teach value. Okay. Things are changing. And they don't understand value. Like this fella here with the cat ears. He doesn't understand value, because today you can work yourself into exhaustion and still be broke. Okay. And these Starbucks workers, they can work themselves, work. But effort alone doesn't guarantee an award or a reward. Okay. And this is the problem with participation trophies. Like, you had all these boomers raising these millennials, and the millennials, they got these participation trophies and, told constantly, if you work hard, you're going to have everything you want. And it turns out, like, okay, that's not true. And now the millennials are, feel entitled because they've worked hard. Loyalty no longer guarantees security, okay? And telling young people just to work harder in this economy that doesn't reward that anymore, it's not virtuous, it's denial, okay? So millennials, Gen Z, they're not blameless in this, okay? I definitely think that there's this comfort addiction in culture, and it comes from, modern technology, and there's this lack of responsibility. They want the flexibility, but they don't want the responsibility. They want the income without the sacrifice. They don't want the discipline, okay? I think that there is a degree of that going on. And, but I would say that rejecting, exploitation is not the same thing as rejecting work. And I know people are going to be like, whoa, Kat, what are you saying? Like, this guy is like right? No, I'm not saying this guy's right in any kind of way, because he's missing the point here as well. But he's been told his entire life by a generation that if you work hard, and he might feel like he's really working hard, and he might actually be like, taking tons of orders, only 2 people on the floor. But he's been told his whole life, like, if you work hard, you're going to have all these riches and spoils. And that's just not what we value in society anymore. And I hear it all the time from boomers, like, these kids don't want to go to the office anymore and they want to work remotely. No, efficiency isn't entitlement. Okay. They're the millennials, Gen Z. What you've got to start asking yourself is, what am I actually worth? And that's not selfish. That's intelligent. And I feel bad for that generation, the millennials, in some sort of way. Now, they have been coddled their whole lives and said, like, oh, participation trophy. And, the boomers are like, why are these kids like so entitled? Well, it's because you told them then, if you just work and like effort, if you put effort in, then you'll get rewards from that. And that's that's a participation trophy mentality. The real question that every worker should be asking is, what do I bring to the table that cannot be replaced? And that's what this guy is not asking himself. He needs to ask himself, okay, what am I doing at Starbucks that nobody else can do? And like, I can't be easily replaced with someone. It's not how long you stay. It's not how tired you are. It's not how loyal you are. It is your value. Value is the only currency that survives in hard times. Scripture makes this very clear. In the parable of talents, the servant praised wasn't the one who simply stayed busy. Okay, it was the one who multiplied what he was given. Okay, wisdom, skill, stewardship mattered more than raw effort. Okay, and that is a lesson that has gotten lost between generations. And it kind of ties directly into that quote. Have you guys heard it? Hard times create strong men. And I think that there was hard times for those boomers and created really strong men. But those strong men created good times. You had the boomers raising up their children, giving them participation trophies, calling them cute little snowflakes. And then those strong men created good times. But the good times created the weak men, the millennials. And those weak men are creating hard times on themselves because now you've got these weak men like this fella. He's a weak man and he's so hard on himself. And he's like, I just need to work more. And he's creating hard times because he's not understanding the importance of value. So boomers came from hard times, built good ones. But instead of teaching the next generation how to preserve that strength, they taught us to maintain comfort, and they got angry. The boomers are angry because the system doesn't work like it used to, where you could work and show up late or show up to the office, stay a little late. and get your pension, get the house. That system doesn't quite work. And really, what the boomers should have been teaching was out of scripture, with the parable of the talents. It's not the servant who works and stays busy. It's the servant who is wise and has skill, and it's not raw effort. Okay. And I think that there's a generational argument here. And now millennials and Gen Z, they're staring at inflation, debt, housing shortages, shrinking opportunity, because they're told this same line over and over again. Just work harder, right? No, you have to make yourself valuable. Okay. If you want, this guy, he wants a livable wage. I don't know what that looks like to him. But if you want something different for your life, you've got to find value and a purpose that separates you apart from everybody else and makes you irreplaceable. That is how you're going to make a ton of money and make your livable wage, whatever that is. So, yeah, I mean, you can say like, oh, the entitlement. And I do think, like, to a degree, this guy's definitely entitled. One, he's just outright lying. He's not eating cans of spaghetti and 99 cents iced teas. He's not living on that. Okay. He's eating a donut as he's, speaking to the camera. So I think that there is a degree of entitlement, but I mean, to an extent, that's kind of the boomers' fault. They told their millennial children, oh, just work hard and you'll get there. And they didn't teach them value. What makes you different than everybody else? And really, it's biblical, it's scripture, and shame on the boomers for not reading their Bibles and passing that down onto their children. Like, hey, what's your purpose? And how are you going to set yourself apart from the rest of the world? Real irreplaceable value. That's the solution. Build your skills, build skills that matter. I'm sorry, but anybody can be a barista and do coffees. This guy should be asking, how can I make myself irreplaceable at Starbucks? How can I make myself valuable, more valuable? Maybe he should be pursuing something else as far as a career. Maybe he's at the top of the industry there, and there's nothing more that he can provide value to the company other than being a barista. So that means, hey, go find your value and stop worshiping busyness, and start pursuing usefulness. How useful are you? Because this country won't be restored by people who simply work harder. Okay. It's going to be restored by people who understand their worth, accept responsibility, and refuse to live beneath it. Okay. So that's another thing, is understanding how valuable you are as a person, that you are created in the image of God, and refusing to live beneath that value. But this guy, he doesn't understand his value at all. So much so that he doesn't even understand his gender. Okay. So yeah, it's going to be impossible for this fella to make more than what he wants, or what he's currently making at Starbucks, because he doesn't get, his own value and his own worth. So much so to the point where he didn't even understand his gender or his sex. So yeah, he's going to have a hard time in life. But I just to kind of give a different perspective here. Telling these people to work harder is not going to do anything. Telling your millennial or Gen Z grandson or daughter to just go out and work harder, not going to do anything. Tell them to understand their value and to provide something irreplaceable. That is what I think would fix a lot of it. All right. Smash that like button, share this out with your friends, subscribe to the channel. So do appreciate you being here. Hit that like button. I've got to go for the rest of the day. But we'll be back at it. Today's Friday, so I'll be back at it on Monday. I can't believe that we're almost to the first of the year. That's going to be crazy. I'll be back at it on Monday. We're going to have a few special shows next week. I do want to talk about Hanukkah from the Christian perspective. A few other interesting podcasts will be dropped, special editions of the Conservative Cat Show. So keep an eye out for those, and I'll catch you on Monday.